Today we continue our discussion of this new book entitled Critiquing Generative AI in Africa's Media Ecosystems. This book was written by Lungile Tshuma and Trust Matsilele. This book was published by Routledge, and a copy of it can be accessed in the description panel of this video. I think we can now get into a discussion of the core ideas of the book. I just want you to, lay it down to us. What do you consider to be the core ideas, and what is the book's central argument?
As the title suggests, what we are trying to do, in fact, the chapters that are in the book that are trying to do is to critique generative AI from a global majority or global south perspective. I think, like any other preceding technology, there has been bias that accompanies these technologies. I think you probably remember during the Arab Spring uprising of 2011, right? There was a lot of utopia about a Twitter revolution or a revolution enabled by these technologies, forgetting these offline ties that already existed in countries like Libya and other parts of North Africa. So what we tried to do in this volume is to reject some of these Western notions of technology having this universal effect across the world. And there are other scholars who have actually challenged these views, like you can think of Malcolm Gladwell in his seminal work called Small Change, published in 2011, and Yevgeny Morozov's work called Net Delusion. They've already challenged these ideas that try to romanticize technologies, right? And that's the same thing that we are seeing, especially around the hype of AI that is going to be revolutionizing commerce, is going to revolutionize other fields like journalism. I'm sure even in your primary department like history, right? Yes. You always hear about the effects of artificial intelligence and another subfield of that, which is generative artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. So the volume seeks to challenge this utopian, but also this romanticization that characterize a lot of debates around generative AI. While we might domesticate some of its use cases, while we might be able to domesticate some of its competencies into African spaces, there are also embedded limitations that come with these technologies. You can think of language, you can think of historical biases, because these technologies are built using data, and we know that data historically has disenfranchised people of the global south, predominantly black people. One of the interesting cases as generative AI was coming into the mainstream was its bias when it tries to project people of different racial groups around professions. One of the earliest signs was when you ask generative AI to develop images or videos of a doctor with patients, the bias would be a white doctor and black patients. And it would reject, even if you prompt it to develop video images of a black doctor with white patients, it would reject. Why? Because there's bias that is embedded in these technologies. I think the idea is that technologies are not neutral. They are product of people's cultures, they are product of people's histories, they are product of people's biases. And this permeates through these technologies. And that's exactly what we are trying to do in this volume, is to challenge some of these stereotypes and biases that are embedded in the creation. And I'm sure Lungile I have something to say about that here.
Yes.
Just to add from what Trust just said, I think we need to agree that any form of technology, it mimics any community. It mimics society. It is not neutral. It is never innocent. So as a result, from what even Trust is saying, that the way AI works is a reflection of the existing social inequalities. So if AI is developed by men, for example, it is bound to be masculine in nature. it is bound to be the face of that particular person. And the likelihood of it being so biased against women, it is likely to be high, because technology is a creation of humans. So as a result, this book it forms part of a design justice, where we seek to ensure that these new tools, these new technologies, AI in this case, it serves justice to all the communities. Because what we are now witnessing, other scholars argue that if we are not critical about AI, we will end up experiencing a different form of colonization. For Africa, long back, colonization was very violent, death and so forth. But now we're witnessing a different form of colonization, which is coming through data, leading to data colonization. Other scholars calling it data grab. Long back, during colonization, they were grabbing land, farms, and so forth. But now we are seeing a new form through data. So we need to be critical. How is this data sourced? How is it used? How and who is benefiting from it? Because we can't be in a situation where these big techs take our data for economic purposes, for capitalism purposes. As a result, they are now exploiting the marginalized. You see, so those are some of the arguments or issues which this book is reflecting on, to try and ensure that there's justice, and also leading to what other scholars now call it epistemic disobedience, which is a refusal to accept AI systems that perpetuate digital exploitation. So we locate ourselves within that, and all the scholars also who distributed, who contributed in this book, they're grappling with all these concepts to ensure that there's fairness, there's equality.
That's very interesting, gentlemen. You know, as historians, when we hear you speak like this, we take it way back, and we can actually see, you know, the validity of the arguments that you are making in the context of the current times. You know, all the revolutions that have given birth to all these technologies, the revolutions from the first industrial revolution to the current fourth industrial revolution, Africa has been a major supplier of raw materials, but never a beneficiary of the end product of whatever technologies get to be invented by such a revolution. And that's exactly what we are seeing with the fourth industrial revolution today as we speak, with all these artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning and stuff. So I get really interested when, you know, you speak like this. This is one of the, you know, this is one of the books that I've seen, especially on the series, that is engaged with artificial intelligence. But Dr. Trust, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably add that. I mean, Lungile has already alluded to the idea of historical, you know, violent colonial system. But I think there is still continuation. While there is exploitation of data, etc., but there's still continuation of exploitation. So if you look at you know, places like DRC, maybe the interesting case in point is the Kolwezi copper and cobalt mine, right? Where there's clear abuse of, you know, young people in the mining space. And people have been forcibly moved out of their area, so there have been forced evictions to make way for these mining companies to take place. And who is the beneficiaries? Is this big tech in the Silicon Valley who don't pay Africa a fair share of the extraction that is happening. So Africa still remain at the far end of the value chain, doesn't participate at the early phases. I mean, we probably saw the case of there's this initiative by Strive Masiwa and NVIDIA, where they are trying to build this Pan-African AI factory in South Africa, Midrand, right? Again, this focus, they're saying, is on AI innovation and infrastructure. But then they don't come into this partnership as equal partners, right? Because NVIDIA is probably the biggest company globally, with over a size of 500 billion. It's the biggest company in the world right now, bigger than Tesla, bigger than all these other companies. So that on its own means that there are no equal power relations between an African company, African technology company, and this global technology company. And again, while this might promote African innovation, but there's still continuation of this unequal, uneven power relations between the global north and the global south. But beyond these uneven relationships, there's also the element of exploitation, resource stripping of Africa without much value addition happening within the continent. So we are simply participating in the infrastructure elements, supplying some of these rare earth minerals or rare earth components, things like cobalt, graphite, things like lithium. I mean, if you think of those three minerals that contribute a lot to electronics and AI components, DRC is probably the biggest country if you think of cobalt, right? And Zimbabwe is probably the biggest on lithium. And in Africa, but also now contributing large sums in the global AI space. And then Madagascar, Tanzania, they also contribute a lot on graphite. So these are three African countries, just case studies. South Africa also contribute a lot on precious minerals, right? That also contribute to the AI infrastructure. But Africa's participation in the AI ecology is very minimal. Other than supplying the raw materials, the participation is minuscule. So there's still this continuation of exploitation through these uneven power relations, but also exclusion of Africa, especially a participation at a higher level. We are still supplying raw materials, but not meaningfully participating in the AI ecosystem. I mean, we supply 30% of the global supplies on things like cobalt, but we are still at the periphery when you think about participation also under other aspects of AI ecosystem.
Wow.